Good afternoon, everyone. And if you're joining us from Seattle, good morning. It's very early in the morning for you guys joining us from there. My name is Manzur Mohammed. I'm a co-founder of Capacitas. We are big believers that great performance in the cloud means that you use less capacity, which usually means that you incur less cost in the cloud. But that also means that systems tend to be more predictable in terms of reliability and cost for the long term. But doing that type of efficiency in an organization of scale is no easy challenge, and especially where that ecosystem is complex and has many interdependencies. So I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Anderson Quach, the Chief Technology Officer of Qualtrics today. He's joining us from Seattle. So it's 8 a.m. in the morning at the moment for him. And he's going to provide us insights on how he steers such a large, complex organization such as Qualtrics, and how he sees the future as Qualtrics uses GenAI into their product sets. This event will last about 45 minutes. We'll have about 5 minutes at the end as well to take questions. You can post your questions in the chat. Anderson and myself will be able to see those, and we'll pick up the questions at the end to answer them as many as we can in the time period we got. So Qualtrics, if you don't know anything about Qualtrics, they're a 2 billion global revenue SaaS company. And you might think of Qualtrics as a survey company, but there's so much more than that. They are an experience management company. I'm sure Anderson will explain this a lot better than me. But behind that experience management, it means that you have to gather an awful lot of data. So the figures I have are that you've got 15 billion personas. Is that right, Anderson?
Yeah, that's about right.
And you process 1.2 billion surveys per year and over 2 billion chats and calls. So it's pretty significant numbers. But the platform that's behind that is processing all that data and trying to produce insights on what customers and employees of enterprises are really experiencing and thinking. So I'm going to introduce Anderson briefly before I let him introduce himself properly. So I've known Anderson for more than a year now, as we've partnered with them in their cloud journey, and they've moved all their data centers into the cloud. And on a personal level, I really like Anderson. I find they're very easy to talk to and ask questions. But what is really impressive is his knowledge of the technology stack. And he's I often find him asking good questions and providing insights during those discussions. So I'll talk a bit more about that. So Anderson, I've done a brief introduction. I think maybe the audience would appreciate if you do introduce yourself and maybe a bit of Qualtrics.
Sure, absolutely. Good morning and good afternoon. It's great to be here as part of the global community. My name is Anderson Quach. My pronouns are he, him. I've been here at Qualtrics for about 9 years or so, and I've been in the software industry for, I think, going on over 22 plus years, give or take. And it's been quite a journey. I come by my means of being an ex-Amazonian and an ex-Microsoft engineer as well. So it's really, really great to be here. As Dr. Manzur alluded to, the power of experience management, think of it as it's a strategic tool for executives to be able to understand what's going on in the fulsomeness of their employees interfacing with customers, and being able to understand both from structured and unstructured listening the entirety of all the conversations are being had. And really what is the purpose of it is to be able to understand how to repeat great experiences that you have between an employer and employee, or the company and a customer, and the company with prospects, but also to be able to better overarching experiences and do various different system recoveries and things like that from a experiences standpoint. So think of it as we provide a very, very scalable, large scale way of being able to listen at scale, and then being able to collect all of this information, both from structured and unstructured information, to get some insights in terms of what was the customer experience like, what was drivers of great experiences, and what are regrets and things that need to be addressed from bad experiences, and being able to put that system of action in front of the right employees to be able to address the company's needs and the customer and employee and prospects needs. We started off as a survey company, and then circa, I would say roughly around 2020, 2021, really expanded in a big way, big meaningful way, into all channels, into omni-channel listening. So being able to gather insight from conversations happening in chats and SMSs, phone conversations, and so on and so forth. And so in that expansion, we've been able to apply this really interesting opinionated view of how we think about what goes on in data in the enterprise. And we like to call it sort of our X data and our O data. And so think of O data as your traditional operating metrics that you normally would be running in an organization. So think of it as like click-through metrics and click streams and CTRs and things like that. And where Qualtrics specializes in is X data, or experience data. So really understanding the deeper behavioral reasons and attitudinal reasons as to why certain decisions are being made by customers, employees, and prospects. And it's that insight that is super valuable and useful to frontline employees, and as well as to executives making strategic decisions. So thank you for the intro.
Yeah, I think when we first engaged with you, I didn't really fully appreciate how much deeper your insights are. And I would say that maybe you can take that data at a surface level, but Qualtrics you really takes to another level, and it's much deeper in the insights and what actually customers are thinking and feeling.
Yeah. I mean, we produce north of 5 billion inferences per month, give or take, or so. And it's in those inferences to be able to understand holistically, and we methodologically, we have something called sort of like the inner loop, which is how do we better that one person's experience and make that repeatable. And then there's the outer loop, which is being able to synthesize and understand the actions of among many and what strategy has to change. And it's that process of inner loop and outer loop interactions, both on the front line and with the executive team, that experience management becomes a very unique piece of software in the enterprise. It helps you really understand holistically what's going on and devise various different actions and strategies to better your enterprise's value proposition. And we serve the global enterprise world, and so for many, if you're interacting with any large multinational organization, more than likely, you've had an interaction and touch point with Qualtrics.
Yeah. So that's useful background into Qualtrics, and also in some ways it touches on the complexity of supporting that richness. Maybe we can talk about your technology team and how it's structured, especially the autonomy. I think that's when we've talked in the past. You've got over 100+ teams, over 1,000 engineers, and they're all autonomous, and they're following I think this is like a Silicon Valley model where teams engineering teams are autonomous. But I think the question well, a number of questions come to mind. Is a lot of organizations are trying to move to that model. What should they think about as they move to that model? What are the, the downsides and what are the pluses of that type of model? And what should they think about before they, or as they embark on that journey? A lot of questions there.
Yes, a lot of questions. It's a compound set of questions. I think it helps to start to contextualize our beginnings, and then I could talk about the evolution in our tech teams and expanding into the 160 plus Scrum teams that we have. So when I first started at Qualtrics 9 years ago, circa 2016, all of engineering was approximately 140 full-time engineers. And the entire company was probably less than 500 people at the time. And we were predominantly in the process. I've come to learn the formal terminologies through the strangler method to demonolith our monolith and then be able to create sets of microservices. And as we continue to grow and expand, and we needed to be able to capitalize on the growth inflection point of the company where customers were coming, traffic was coming at an unprecedented rate, scale was coming at us also at an unprecedented rate. It was really, really quickly evident that having a monolithic source code base and monolithic execution was hindering us, was impeding, velocity for being able to get source code out to production, impeding our ability to get new feature innovations out to production, and then being able to independently scale aspects of our architecture that needed to scale outsized compared to other parts of the system. Steve Jang talked a lot about that in terms of our transformation. Steve Jang, our distinguished engineer here at Qualtrics, and in a previous guest on this podcast here, talked a lot about scaling towards a microservices architecture to get to that state. And oftentimes when you take a look at this, you go, okay, well, how do we go about going from A to B, going from a monolith to microservices, going from teams who are working on shared code bases to be able to get more and more independent? And as it turns out, there's a number of different ways of being able to look at the concerns. So some of the concerns are more functional in nature. So you might look at data systems need to scale out more rapidly and more independently than, say, aspects of back-end systems. And front-end systems want to be able to move more quickly and more independently in terms of user experiences, user interfaces, interfacing with the team than, say, on the back-end infrastructure. And as we started to expand and grow, the concept, the notion of being able to understand what the concerns are and being able to then root those concerns to be able to have them ownable by various different teams became very, very important. And many in this industry, especially in the West Coast, and Amazon has popularized it. And there's so many different books, good books on this, such as like Bill Carr and Colin Breyer's like Working Backwards, for example, talks about how to build these two pizza teams. And conceptually, two pizza teams are teams sized maximum in a way where you could feed with two pizzas. And there's an interesting...
it depends on the size of the pizza, obviously.
It depends on the size of the pizza, but usually roughly around 10 to 12 or so.
Yeah.
And usually you would want to mimic the manager spans and the team sizes to be approximately around the same size. So usually you're looking at team sizes that have spans between 7 to 12 approximately. And in these teams, what you want to be able to do is wire them in such a way where they understand their mission, their vision, and the purpose of why these teams exist, and being able to wire them in such a way that they can move independently as quickly as possible. And so, as I alluded to be able to get yourself set up in that direction, and the way we got ourselves set up in that direction is starting with concerns and where do we have focuses and various different concerns that are ownable independent missions. And then second is the technology stack, the North Star architecture underneath it, to be able to enable those teams to move independently in those concerns. So stepping into a microservices architecture, and if later in the years, about 4 or 5 years ago, we started evolving towards this notion of having domains. And a domain is our ability to, in a software perspective, have grouped concerns of grouped microservices to be able to address a certain problem space that we're trying to address. So, for example, most enterprise software systems have authentication, authorization, auditing, access management, control. And so all of those concerns, we would call those like our authorization domain as a concrete example of that. And again, it's being able to have these teams that then understand their mission, vision, and purpose, and to be able to operate on these ownable domains. And so once you get a team sort of aligned and understanding conceptually, the areas and the boundary parts of what is their responsibility, what source code they own, what services they own, and the mission that they have at hand, this is where it becomes extremely exciting and fun. And it's being able to work with each of these domains and the subsequent two pizza teams underneath them to outline, hey, what's your strategic vision? What do you need to be able to get delivered in the next, call it 12 weeks within the quarter, next 1 to 2 quarters in the year, and then as we step further and further out, to be able to broaden the aperture to look at more longitudinally in terms of multi-year. And so as we're able to continue to grow and scale, we're then able to go from say multi-sprint longitudinal planning to multi-quarter longitudinal planning. And now we've gotten to a point where we have different horizons, where we're looking at multi-year longitudinal planning. And it's so important to be able to resonate the plans with the architecture, with the vision, mission, and purpose of the teams, all the way down to individual ownership. Why it's good is if you take a step back and you go, okay, what are the motivating factors for all the way down to an individual engineer? An individual engineer wants to be able to master their domain, right? Master the ability to construct scalable, reliable, high-performing software and code. And they want to be able to master their skill in such a way that they're able to parlay it into different aspects of career growth, right? As you create more lasting systems, you can afford yourself a lot more autonomy as you kind of go through. And I'm a big fan of the framework of being able to have master autonomy and purpose on an individual sense. And then when you do that, it creates this really interesting ownership mindset all the way from an engineer perspective. And then you create teams with these types of engineers who are able to then focus on the problem domains at hand and really be able to deliver some pretty good value, both on the short term and long term.
That's actually quite interesting. Speaking as a co-founder of Capacitus, ownership is a big thing. So if you own it, then you're a lot more passionate about it. So
that's right.
That is interesting. And if you were an enterprise thinking about this journey, and I was interested in what you just said there. You start with the concerns, and that concerns drive where you focus your attention on. You might, as an enterprise, think, oh, I've got to do everything. But it sounds like you can start this bit by bit on what maybe the business is focused on.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's actually really important to align from the get-go the business outcomes that you're trying to drive, and then align those outcomes all the way down to the Scrum team. The more clear a Scrum team has or two pizza teams has an understanding of their influence and impact on the business outcome, the more they're able to run and execute and be incentivized to execute as autonomously as possible. That's 100% right.
That's interesting. Yeah. And When you're, I suppose, going on to the next question, you've got like autonomous team. You've done a lot of the work to make them autonomous. What are the minuses of that approach with all that autonomy, or is it's all great and there are no downsides?
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of people factor this as growing pains as you continue to grow and scale. So there are certain trade-offs for sure. The reason why two pizza teams and autonomous teams work really, really well is if you think about the network effect of people trying to communicate with each other, it becomes further and further unwieldy as the network and that mesh, the communication mesh of having to keep everybody up to date continues to grow. And it gets really it grows really rapidly. And so in being able to continue to scale and grow effectively, I think you start amplifying on some call it like the salient issues as it relates to scaling some of these teams out. And it starts with communication. And so on communication, it's the having full clarity of does everybody know what each of the domains are intending to go do and what their sort of multi-quarter or multi-year roadmap looks like in terms of being able to support the rest of the developer ecosystem internally and reflective outwards to the business outcomes. And so there can be tendencies for various different challenges as to be able to understand how each of those domains are continuing to build and evolve. And then from that, because the incentive is to be able to meet the market demands and outcomes as rapidly as possible in this high growth situation and world, it then lends itself to sometimes the call it like the lazy engineer principle, or the fact that like the least amount of friction tends to incentivize the most likely outcome or behavior. And so in that situation, you might get duplication. So there is a tendency to be able to say, hey, like I don't want to be blocked by a particular team, so I'm just going to go and unblock myself and do that thing anyway. And those are real concerns. The communication concern and duplication of components and pieces of the architecture in throughout. And there are mitigants to be able to address some of these things. But as you continue to build and scale and align on those outcomes that you're trying to drive to deliver on business results, the question around like how do we do that effectively and how do we do that efficiently becomes more and more apparent as some of these problems start cropping up throughout the life cycle and throughout the process. And the way I think about how to address some of these issues is, there's a famous saying that, repetition doesn't spoil the prayer. I think famously coined by Mercer Myers, is how do you ensure that everybody fully understands what their domains are and where transparently they're executing towards. And so it's super important to be able to have transparency among teams and communication of that transparency to be able to outline where are the various different threads of execution, where can I go find a team's roadmap, how do I understand that particular team's goals so that I can then align my goals and that team's goals to create shared goals. And underneath it all, to support it all, it's very, very important to invest time and effort into understanding an overarching North Star. So each team will contribute to what their domain's North Star architecture, and a North Star architecture is one that is, hey, given sufficient time, where time is not a constraint, where would you want to take the architecture to? And being able to have a common harmonized understanding of that among all of the developers in the organization in order to be able to meet the business outcomes. And so in that North Star architecture, Steve Jang talks a lot about it in his chat with you. It's the how do we achieve all of the business objectives to be scalable, high performant, but in the most elegant way and manner as possible, and being able to transparently publish what that architecture is and is going to be to the entirety of the organization. Another really interesting mechanism, and I think a lot in terms of mechanisms as well, is being able to have a published set of technologies and domains that is well known to the organization. So internally, we employ a tech radar mechanism to be able to understand where in the life cycle of things, of adoption and evaluation, certain technologies are, both internal and external technologies. So an example being, where would we put the adoption of Node.js, right? And Node.js is a very popular framework, predominantly used internally here at Qualtrics for front-end engineering. And we have that in a quadrant of fully adopted and fully supported internally. And so being able to understand what's supported and what's not supported is also super important as well. And so it goes from North Star architecture to frameworks on software that can be readily used and published roadmaps across various different teams.
It's interesting what you just said there, because you can have individualism where you just go ahead and do stuff to get stuff done. But with those mechanisms, the transparency, I guess that's the mechanism to avoid that, isn't it? That everyone's aware of what everyone else is effectively doing in a directionally.
That's right.
It's interesting. So the next question I was going to ask is, obviously we started this piece of work where you were moving to the cloud, and once you move to the cloud, suddenly you have to start thinking about cost. And you've got an organization made up of a lot of autonomous teams, engineers. How do you get engineering to be, all those teams to be on board with this kind of new way of looking at things? Maybe you can share some of your experiences around that.
First, I'd like to share my point of view on individual engineers and their motivations. So as I mentioned before, engineers really want to be able to master and perfect their craft, right? Whether it's building frameworks, debugging, and rooting out various different software bugs and code, or providing the most efficient and most elegant solution available. And it's really tapping into that inner motivation, the inner motivation of, if I deliver excellence in a particular dimension, I'll be rewarded for it, I'll be recognized for it, and individuals can, from a psychological safety perspective, be able to take some of those risks to jump into it. And at the initial get-go, when we started rolling out and saying, wow, okay, we need to be able to drive efficiency in our cloud spend. And in order to drive efficiency, there's the easy way and there's the hard way, right? And the easy way, you could easily just say, hey, I'm just going to buy a bunch of reserved instances and savings plans and call it a day, right? That's the easy way.
Or maybe have a big EDP commit as well and get a bit more.
Commit, the enterprise commit, just being able to say at large, I'm going to buy this certain kind of volume. I have price protections on those volumes. You go great. Solves maybe 20% of the problem. But when you tap into that inner ethos of the engineer who says, hey, I want to build the most effective system possible, but I need to be able to understand what constraints am I operating under. It becomes an interesting challenge, right? As knowledge workers, as people who spend a predominant part of their day time thinking very, very deeply. And oftentimes it comes to various different understandings of those constraints. Especially when you're running enterprise software, you're having to deal with a lot of non-ideals. And with a lot of non-ideals also comes with a big emphasis of non-functional requirements. And so examples of non-functional requirements include the quality of the software, how much of the software is as exposed to by customers, where customers are finding regressions and defects and bugs that you're not intending the customer to go find. Then there are reliability concerns, right? Is the software running at 3 nines of availability or above? How's the reliability of the software? Is it operating within our service level objectives? And are service calls and page loads operating within the latencies that we're expecting as well? And having spent a good chunk of my career actually doing performance optimization with Microsoft assets, with like Office, O365 on the web, as well as MSN and Microsoft.com and so on and so forth. And having spent a ton of time of doing performance optimizations with Amazon digital devices as well. Actually, one thing I like to geek out on is the one API set I gotten to contribute to. I would say has probably served trillions upon trillions of users is the web performance timing APIs that are embedded in everybody's web browser today. So if you dropped into the console right now and typed window.performance, I help spec out those APIs in the W3C cross-functionally in a working group composed of Microsoft.
So I know, like here at Capacitas, we must love you then.
And the motivation there was really to kind of understand real-time user metrics from a client perspective. But I digress. So going back to it is, how did I get the team motivated to really think about concerns of cost? And it's not so much as explicitly of like, hey, everybody, we need to get to a cost reduction footprint, as much as it's a computer science problem, AKA an optimization problem of how do we deliver without compromise the best performance possible. And as we're delivering on the best performance possible, how are we optimizing our systems in such a way that we're using the least amount of resources? And so it starts triggering that little bit in terms of where a lot of computer science students early on in their career are always thinking about like, hey, how do I get to space and compute efficiency in terms of my algorithm? Like, how do I use the least amount of memory and have the most effective execution, computational time of executing my algorithm? And so it really tickles that part of the intellectual part of someone's mind. And so it presented as a challenge as, hey, we're really looking to performance and optimize our services. It really shifts the lens entirely, because what we're ultimately trying to do is provide the best experience possible to our customers. And usually the best experience tends to be the one that uses resources most efficiently and most effectively. And so when we shifted that lens towards the optimization perspective, it becomes really interesting problems to solve. Teams suddenly would say like, hey, we would be able to better our user experience by 30, 40%, and also at the same time cut our costs by 50, 60%. You go, wow, okay, that's the kind of incentive, that's the kind of drive that you want to be able to continue to push and motivate your teams. And it helps that I had this history as an engineer in my past to get super excited in this domain as well on performance optimization.
So there's an authenticity though as a leader in what you're saying, because you believe it. I can even tell from what you're saying, this is what you genuinely believe. I mean, obviously from Capacitas perspective, we always believe it and we've seen it. But it must be harder for a leader who maybe hasn't had that first-hand experience to show that level of authenticity and not just see it as a cost reduction exercise. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think where it starts with is you only can build and improve things of the stuff that you can actually measure. And so it really is important to be able to measure in that journey of it is like, what are the different constraints in your business? And for us, the constraints were, hey, we need to be able to be highly available. We need to be able to be low latency. We need to be high reliability. And we need to be cost effective. And so each of these dimensions creates a tension, right? You might say like, hey, I can solve all of my availability issues if I scale to the gold or platinum standard on my services, right? I select the largest instances, I have multiple redundancies, so on and so forth, but it ends up becoming very, very expensive. And And then oftentimes the most elegant solution is the one that satisfies all of those constraints. And so for someone who's not as naturally inclined, I would say like it's spend time on the measures. It's what metrics matter to your business, and how do you want to push and optimize and drive to optimizing towards those metrics.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like the approach. I was very impressed in your engagement, how you communicated. It is really, it's almost like making it a puzzle. It's an interesting problem to solve. Yeah, let's try and make this a very quality product with those constraints. It makes it an interesting problem. And I'm going to talk a bit about leadership and culture. I know we spoke about this last week, and I thought it was really interesting. So every time we've had discussions where we've presented results with you, Anderson, you just pick up something and mention a piece of detail quite low level in the stack that we weren't aware of. And I'd be surprised, gosh, how did Anderson know that? How does he pick that up? And I know in a discussion last week, you gave a bit of context why that understanding is so important. Maybe if you can just share that, what you said last week, and your history and your thinking.
Yeah, happy to share some of that. A lot of it comes from sort of like the formalized expectations of, having grown up in the environment of Amazon, and then also grown up in the environment at Microsoft. And so as technical leaders continue to excel and succeed in these organizations, there's a deep-rooted expectation of being able to have full understanding and comprehension of the systems and the business context and the software context and the technology stack context of how all of the pieces come together and interplay. And famously, Amazon has all of these leadership principles, and one of the core key leadership principles there is actually, funny enough, I had a conversation once with some executives, and one of the key leadership principles Jeff Bezos held above all else, and it was an interesting thought exercise. He was like, "Hey, Anderson, if you were able to kind of isolate one leadership principle at Amazon, and if Amazon were only allowed to have one, what would that be?" And the story I heard, secondhand was, it's the leadership principle of being right a lot. And I was like, really? I would have thought it was customer obsession.
Yeah.
And it was so counterintuitive to me. I'm like, what do you mean by being right a lot? And as I took a step back and thought about that, and thought about how all the other leadership principles came to interplay to support that, and I was like, wow, that actually makes a whole lot of sense. You're trying to wire your barometer of understanding of what is the right solution for the system at hand by taking in and leveraging signals of customer obsession. What does the customer really want and really, really desire to be able to have in their hands, with all the other kind of like principles that kind of support that. And the other one that really comes to mind is the mechanism to be able to get to that understanding of being right a lot is to be able to dive deep. And that deep understanding of how the interplay between the technical stack and the people who are working on the technical stack with the business outcomes that you're trying to drive, and connecting all of that together. And so oftentimes I really enjoy to employ this particular mechanism is to be able to do deep dive reviews with various different teams, where I set some time aside to be able to help spend time with the team to understand their North Star architecture, where do they want to take their North Star architecture, and the challenges that they have at hand, and the outcomes that they're trying to drive and optimize towards. And it's through those deep dives that I come to understanding of the interplay of the technical debt challenges that they have, and the opportunity, the business opportunity that they are working to be able to capitalize on. And it's connecting all of those dots together. It's having all of those deep dives with all the various different Scrum teams, and building that picture is where that knowledge comes from. And it's a muscle that I had gotten a chance to really build a lot at Microsoft and at Amazon. And it's something I practice a whole ton here at Qualtrics. It also helps that intrinsically I have a personality trait where I think it's another Amazon principle that you can encapsulate it in, but it's something that I've gotten to learn a lot very early on within myself, all the way in high school and in college, was my desire to always want to be curious and being a lifelong learner. And so wanting to understand, like, how does something work and why does it work the way it works? And so that intrinsic trait and value has also been a driver for me as well.
And I wonder, is that curiosity that makes you want to almost join the dots, all those different conversations you're having where you're doing those deep dives, you can almost establish this mental model of what's happening underneath the covers?
That's right. That's right. Connecting all of those dots together, understand where we can most optimally leverage systems and architecture, but also empathize and appreciate the nuances, the technical debt, the technical challenge, the why is this domain hard, and working with the teams on some of those challenges.
No, it's great. It's great. And I think the teams must really appreciate it, because that's someone's really interested in from a senior level. It's kind of
just engaging and expressing your genuine interest in a domain is, the team appreciates that far more than anything, right? It's just like, wow, you actually see the work that I'm doing and you're appreciating the impact of my work. I think that's it gives to the team as much as I get from the knowledge transfer.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is part of being a successful leadership, being able to dive deep, have those conversations, and have that picture. I think that's definitely the case. I'm going to now ask some questions about Gen AI because it's so topical.
Sure.
And, I know that Qualtrics is very involved in that. So maybe we could start off by asking, how are you looking to use Gen AI in your products and your platform?
Such a simple question with a multivariant answer. I'll probably start with the business side of things, and then work my way backwards from the business side all the way into the engineering culture side of things. So we've been doing AI for a good part of almost a decade now, all the way from sort of regression and various different analysis techniques to transformers and so forth for our text analytics stack. And as Gen AI has made its waves in the tech industry, we're very much early adopters in it, and particularly in our product offerings. And so when you think about one of the core basic use cases of Gen AI is very, very good at being able to do analysis. And it's also being able to be good at code generation and code execution on that code generation. And it's a great research partner as well, as you can enable it to use it to be able to create content as a result. And so when you think about those core basic capabilities and you go, oh, wow, in a business setting, especially one that is so focused on insights and analytics, it's very, very highly applicable. And so we built and launched a number of different feature functionality as it relates to being able to draw insights from large data sets. We have our feature sets like our Insight Explorer and our Qualtrics Assist. So Qualtrics Assist, think of it as your co-pilot chatbot that lives in our dashboard business intelligence tool to be able to, in a natural language way, query the data sets, be able to provide insights. We have launched very, very early on the employee experience side of things of our Qualtrics Assist, and we're very, very imminently in our public previews and getting towards general availability right now on some of the customer experience management, specifically honed in on the customer care and location as we speak. And so we've built a number of these different capabilities leveraging Gen AI. And earlier on in this year, Q1, we announced and have had quite good success in terms of customer adoption on our experience agents. So think of it as our semi-autonomous and autonomous agents that we then deploy in a customer's environment to be able to address, being able to help them with customer deflection and addressing in-moment experience management needs. And so we've had quite an expansive array of capabilities that we've been able to develop and get to market. So working backwards from that, we go, okay, we're not just building and leveraging Gen AI to build our future functionality, but very, very early on, we have been adopters of trying to take advantage of the efficiencies that can be gained from Gen AI tooling. And so a couple of key areas we've invested quite a bit in that I'm excited about is it took until this generation of coding assistant tools through Cursor AI's latest updates with all of the great coding functionalities that's happened in the Cloud 4.0 models, along with adoption with Windsurf, that we've been able to really see a massive inflection point of internal code assist tool adoption. It really went from, hey, this is kind of like a neat tool to, it saves a little bit of time, but it might create more issues than solve problems, to this year, it was this massive inflection point going from like a 50% adoption to close to 75, 80% adoption of these tools internally of, hey, legitimately, this is helping me solve problems. I can use the tools to better understand the code context. I can fix bugs more efficiently. I could do migrations from framework A to framework B much more effectively and efficiently. So that's been very, very helpful. Another very big, interesting class of use of Gen AI is we have internally what we call our quality AI hub, or it's really our AI hub now that's transformed into, where we have something like over 27 plus tools that we use to be able to draw various different analyses, correlation, and causation. So think of it as if we have an incident, we have these tools that can then harvest through Slack and Jira and the source code to be able to help us with root cause analyses, to be able to help us draw a correlation of these things, and being able to, in a much shorter period of time, get to the action items to prevent the repeat of that incident. And so these internal Gen AI tools, these analytic tools, have been so effective for us, and now has been used cross-functionally beyond engineering, even in the support capacity and in the customer client capacity as well.
Well, I've seen it firsthand as part of the engagement. I know you guys you had a specific performance issue, which was very complex performance issue, and you used it firsthand. So it is impressive. Yeah.
The one where it took that was a really interesting find where
it's very interesting.
It was such a subtle bug in one of our Elasticsearch plugins, and Gen AI was able to pop it out like that. It was fantastic.
It's amazing, isn't it? So you could almost argue that there's no tech debt's no longer a problem.
Potentially, yeah. One of these days.
I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to just maybe summarize some of the key points for our audience. I think we're probably out of time for questions. I do apologize. So I think if we are going on to a journey to have autonomous teams, I think what you just mentioned there, Anderson, is be focused on what the business concern is or the business problem to guide that. I thought that was really, really helpful. I think the other thing that I really picked up on is actually making optimization not a cost challenge, but like an engineering challenge. It's a puzzle. How do you make a system that meets all these criteria? So you're almost throwing down the gauntlet to the engineers and getting them excited about this problem to solve. And I think that the other thing as a leader, really being able to look into the detail and engage with your teams, which it must be like a challenge in itself, where you got like 100+ teams to talk with. And then really, actually, I think the final aspect of GenAI, how we can, it's really changing lots of things on the ground and helping us deal with problems that used to take us a lot of time, and especially around performance issues, maybe speed up those resolutions very quickly. So I think that's my key takeaways from that. So Anderson, look, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on this event. I found it super interesting, and I'm sure the audience would have found it super interesting. Thank you very much, and it's much appreciated. And I hope to talk to you soon, Anderson. And also, I hope to see the audience join us in our next event.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun having this chat.
Oh, it was great to hear it. Thank you very much, Anderson. Take care. Cheers.